Hi guys, Ivan Zasimov here. It's been a little over a month since my last video, and I just wanted to comment a little bit on the New Hampshire primaries because they were yesterday, and Bernie Sanders won. He looks like things could change, obviously, but it looks like he's going to be the Democratic nominee if things keep up at this point. And I just wanted to comment on something that I had sort of noticed, and I've been noticing since Iowa, is a lot of people on the more, I guess the term maybe is dissident right, but the part of the American right that isn't just Republican orthodoxy. So people like Tucker Carlson, people like Rod Dreher, people like that, were sort of expressing, maybe excitement is too strong of a word, but a kind of, yeah, I'll say that, a kind of excitement that Bernie Sanders is going to be the Democratic nominee. The reason why they say this is because, these are people who, in some ways very legitimately, are very mad at the current system in Washington. And even if they have problems with Trump and all his foibles, they're somewhat glad for the way Trump sort of blew through Republican orthodoxy, the way he sort of blew through Republican dogmas about, completely free and unfettered markets and free trade on the one hand and a kind of hawkish foreign policy on the other. They're glad he kind of blew through that, and he sort of showed that there is a place in American politics for a different kind of conservative politics. Well, now they're excited about Bernie Sanders because, it looks like Bernie Sanders is doing the same thing. He's kind of the populist candidate. He's running against the Democratic establishment. And isn't it great because he's burning down the Democratic establishment, and that's what he wants. And this will be great because this is, just as Trump kind of blew it up on the right, Bernie Sanders is going to blow it up on the left. I don't get this mentality, and I think it's a really bad mentality to have. So there could be two reasons for this. The first case is Tucker Carlson might be doing this. Tucker Carlson he's had a bunch of kind of heterodox Democratic speakers on his show the past few months, like people like Tulsi Gabbard and maybe even Andrew Yang, but at least people who support them. Well, last night he had someone who worked for Bernie Sanders' campaign, and he was kind of, very friendly towards the Sanders person, and basically saying, well, at least you're not working with identity politics, and you know what, you're working for the working class. We may not disagree, but hey, that's great. Now, there could be two reasons. The first reason is Tucker Carlson is sort of cynically supporting Sanders now and kind of giving him a lot of airtime so he becomes the nominee, and then as soon as Sanders becomes the nominee, we'll start stabbing him in the back, and we'll talk about what an awful person he is. This is exactly what Joe Scarborough, the host of Morning Joe, this is exactly what he did with Donald Trump in 2015 and 2016. He had Trump on all the time. He even joined Trump in some of the insults. Marco Rubio is nothing, and Ted Cruz is silly, and all these people. Look at Donald Trump. He's tearing up the debates here. And then as soon as Donald Trump becomes nominee, it's, oh, look at that terrible Donald Trump. Look at that. That's awful. That's terrible. Oh, this and oh, that. And I personally find it really slimy. So I would really hope Tucker Carlson is not doing that, because even as much as I dislike Bernie Sanders and his politics, I just think that's a generally slimy thing to do. The second reason, which I think is probably the actual reason he's doing this, is, Tucker Carlson is, and again, in many ways legitimately, sort of fed up with the bipartisan ruling class in Washington, and he wants to replace it with something different. He wants to replace it with political movements he thinks are more responsive to the people. So that's Donald Trump on the right, and he thinks Bernie Sanders on the left. So here's where I think he's wrong. The difference between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump was something that was really different in the Republican Party. He was something that the Republican Party hadn't seen in a long time. He was not just Mitt Romney on steroids. He was not just John McCain on steroids. Besides his personality and the fact that he fought back, okay, that's one thing. But even some of the ideas he was espousing, stuff on trade, for instance, I mean, that was something I don't know if there's anyone in the Republican Party who talked about tariffs and why we need to bring back American manufacturing. This was just assumed within the Republican Party that manufacturing was shipping off to China. That's just the way free trade works. That's just the way markets work, and you just got to deal with it. And then on foreign policy, okay, there are some Republicans like Rand Paul who are a little bit more restrained in their foreign policy. But again, combining this with the tariff policy, this was something that was very different. This was something that represented a strain of conservatism that hadn't been active since maybe Pat Buchanan. Even if that. Bernie Sanders is just the current Democratic Party on steroids. He's not saying anything fundamentally different from the current party line. It's just more extreme. Okay, fine. So current Democrats don't support Medicare for all. Okay, but they certainly want more government intervention in the healthcare system, not less. Okay, Sanders supports, abortion all the way up to the third term. Well, maybe not all the Democrats do that, but they're the pro-choice party. It's not like they're all pro-life. Sanders wants health care for illegal immigrants. Okay, well, maybe most of the Democrats don't want that, but they're certainly much softer on illegal immigration than the Republicans are. So this is kind of confusing to me is, well, why don't you like, and I would think that Tucker Carlson, at least when I watch his show, he seems to be against a lot of the kind of woke intersectionality of the left. Well, you're going to get that even more with Bernie Sanders. I mean, I know the guy yesterday he was talking to, kind of pretended, all this stuff about reducing to race identitarianism, that's all trying to keep the working class down. We won't be like that. We're not going to play into that. I really think that's a bunch of BS. I mean, the problem with Bernie Sanders, in my opinion, is not that, he is very radical, but it's not that he is someone who is going to be very vindictive towards conservatives, religious traditionalists, things like that. He doesn't strike me as that kind of person. He strikes me as a person who is going to maybe disagree with a religious conservative, but is not going to go out of his way to constantly demonize them in his speeches or in his policy. My problem with him is he surrounds himself with people who do this. He has a complete inability to fight back against anyone running to the left of him. He can only punch back against people who run to the right of him, like Joe Biden, like Buttigieg or Klobuchar. And that's basically how he's been winning this campaign. He only attacks from the left. He only looks at the other candidates and says, well, they're not as pure in their left-wing ideology as I am. But as soon as someone comes to him that's more left-wing, he just kind of folds. I mean, look at his reaction to some of these Black Lives Matter protesters. And you remember when he was speaking, Black Lives Matter started to protest and try to shout him down. He just folded right into it. He didn't care. That makes me very nervous as a conservative. It makes me very nervous heading into an election, because what is a guy like that going to do? If you have something like the Covington case happen again, where the media just completely scapegoat conservatives, or, I don't even know if these kids were conservative, but, white Catholic kids, completely blowing something up into something it wasn't. Bernie Sanders is probably not going to care about it, because he just has this complete blind spot to anyone running to the left of him. This is why he, he seems to have no problem with people like Linda Sarsour or Rashida, is it Tlaib? Whatever you think about Israel, if you think maybe we support Israel too much, these are people who have contacts with Palestinian terrorists. Is this, Trump waffled a little bit on the alt-right. And, I don't think that was right either, but, he didn't have actual neo-Nazis in his campaign supporting him. the way Sanders has some of these really what looks like kind of radical Muslim people in his campaign. And so I don't really understand this. I think it's a huge mistake to kind of celebrate Bernie's ascendancy in the party. I think it's very dangerous because it really is just more of the same, just amped up to 10. I think Tucker was smart in supporting people like Gabbard or Yang because even if you disagree with them, they are advocating for something very different. And even if Yang or Gabbard disagree with religious conservatives on abortion or transgenderism or LGBTQ stuff, they're not going to hold them in contempt. I think Gabbard especially has made this point clear, and I trust her on this. She's not going to hold people in contempt. She's not going to try to go after people's religious liberty because they, believe something different than she does on homosexuality or transgenderism. Again, I don't think Sanders necessarily will, but I think he's going to stick his cabinet with people who would love to do those sorts of things, and he's not going to do anything about it when they do. He's going to turn a blind eye. He would put people like, Kamala Harris in his cabinet. That's someone who, okay, is she going to arrest religious conservatives? No. But I think she holds people like me and like, my listeners and the people who I share political views with. I think she holds people like us in contempt because, we hold backwards, bigoted views. So, and Carlson's complained a lot about this, rightfully so. So I think it's very dangerous I'm calling out Carlson because he's kind of been doing this the most, to kind of gleefully get excited over a Bernie Sanders campaign. And again, maybe that's too strong, but I really think that's what he's doing. I think he seems somewhat excited over it. Because number one, he's either doing it because he thinks, Trump will completely trounce this guy, so why don't I pump him up now and then, watch Trump just trounce him during the general election. I think A, that's kind of a slimy thing to do. B, be careful because Hillary Clinton wanted Trump to be the nominee so she could trounce him. Look how that backfired. Or B, well, me and Bernie, even though we disagree, we're sort of on the same side because, we're both sort of populist. We both sort of don't like the current Washington establishment. Again, I'd be really careful about that because Bernie Sanders is coming from a very different place. Someone like, I think Carlson is right to point that out about Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard, but not about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the Democratic establishment. I know he pretends to be running against it, but ideologically, he's just that establishment ramped up to 10. I think the only reason why a lot of media people don't like him, and I agree it's unfair the way that they've been going after him, but the reason why a lot of media people don't like him is because they think he's unelectable. I don't think it's because they don't like his views. I think they like his views. The problem with Bernie Sanders to them is he's saying the quiet part out loud. So I guess my general point is I think conservatives like me, who may be a little bit more open to the kind of populist turn we've been taking, I think we should be a little careful on how this is manifesting on the left, because the Bernie Sanders people are nasty. They'll go after anyone. That tape with Bloomberg talking about minorities and stop and frisking, that was posted by a Sanders supporter. And it's fun now. We can all laugh now when they're doing it to the Democrats. It's not going to be fun when they start doing it to Trump supporters. And if they get the office, it's not going to be fun when they start acting like that when he's in power. I'm not so much worried about Sanders. I'm more worried about his base. I think his base really kind of horrifies me. Not everyone who votes for him, but the kind of Bernie bro kind of crowd. That kind of scares me a little bit because they just seem so ideologically hardcore that they're just, you can't compromise with these people. And I don't think we can count them as our allies. I think that's, politically speaking, I just think that's wrong. I think they're very dangerous. So I would urge conservatives like Tucker Carlson, who are sort of gleefully looking at, the kind of destruction of the Democratic Party, with people like Bernie Sanders coming in, I'd be really careful cheering this because I think it could lead to some real problems for conservatives and really for the country from this point on.